what's up, everybody? Welcome to Simply Cyber Live, the stream that every Thursday brings you industry experts on for long-form content conversations. And today is going to be special. We have brought on to the Simply Cyber stage today Bob Gourley, CTO of OODA, which we will talk about, hosted the OODA Con conference not too long ago, and we'll get into all that. But really, the piece de resistance, if you will, of what we're going to be getting into today is how Bob was integrally involved in the original APT. We throw APTs around all over the place around here, right? APT 41, APT 39, 47, they get special names sometimes, right? Like, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Well, Bob was working before they even called it APTs, and he was on the very first case. It is an amazing story, and that's just one of the many things that Bob has his fingers on and has gotten into. We might be getting into military capabilities, trust as an actual, security objective and capacity, obviously geopolitics and how cyber's evolved over time. There is a million things to get to, but we're starting with that first OG APT to get started. Now, just a little housekeeping rules. If you're new here, chat is on stage. You can see it right there, which is absolutely awesome. Feel free to engage with each other, but you have the ability to throw a question up on stage and have Bob answer it or get clarification on something. Whatever it is, if it's for us, drop a Q in the front of it so I know. I'll flag it, push it to the side, and make sure that Bob gets to it as we kind of round through the questions. I am super excited for you guys to meet Bob. He is just an absolute delight. He's a great guy, and, let's go get him. Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Good, Jerry. How are you?
I'm good. So I should have said this in the intro, but a lot of people may not know this. Bob and I never knew each other until we met at DEF CON at the US Cyber Games cocktail hour, right? Isn't that right, Bob, how we met?
Yeah, it was. It was absolutely there. And but yeah, I think we would have met earlier if it wasn't for the pandemic, I have to say.
Yeah, the pandemic really did throw a wrench in things, but definitely glad Jess Gourley basically, said, you guys need to meet each other, put us together. We had a drink, and, it blossomed into what is now a guest appearance on Simply Cyber Live. So really, really genuinely appreciate you being here today, Bob.
Well, Jess is the ultimate connector, now that you mention it. I think she knows everybody, and she's really great at connecting people for these kind of discussions.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully she keeps, if she keeps wanting me to meet people, I am going to continue to meet them because she's put me in touch with very cool people, much like yourself, Bob. So, Bob, real quick, if you can, just maybe like to start off the story, like 2 sentences about like why you were in the place you were in, but talk to us, Bob, if you would, about what was the original APT and how did you come into, basically being on the case, if you will, of this threat actor?
All right. So quickly, I was in the Navy. I was a Navy intelligence officer starting in 1982. And my job always through my career was leaning towards all source intelligence fusion. So how do you bring all the information together on a complex military operation and figure out what's going on and brief your bosses? So I was that kind of operational intelligence officer. Near the end of my career, I was asked to be the intelligence officer for a new organization called the Joint Task Force for Computer Network Defense. This is the first Department of Defense cyber command. It had operational authorities to order defenses in all DoD networks and all services. And I was their intelligence officer, their J2. So standing up a new job and a new office and a new organization, but bringing these experiences of operational intelligence. And that's how I got into that position.
Yeah. So before we get into your first, I guess your first gig in that role, I'm curious, what was the catalyst for establishing this cyber command in the first place?
Okay. Well, there had been a series of events in the Department of Defense that were very concerning to the Secretary of Defense and the Deputy Secretary of Defense. There was a series of intrusions that were hitting DoD networks and computers that no one could figure out. And it's at a time when tensions were building with Iraq. We were thinking of bombing Iraq again. And we thought it could be Iraq hacking our networks. No
Mhm.
one could figure it out until after months of investigation. It turns out it was two kids in California mentored by another kid in Israel. This was Operation Solar Sunrise. And it was really one of the catalysts that pushed the Department of Defense to act. Another one was an exercise led by red teamers out of NSA. It was part of a joint staff command and control exercise. These red teamers from NSA were able to prove that they could go from unclassed internet systems through into the Department of Defense systems, still unclassified, and they were able to prove that they could go all the way into secret systems, and if they wanted to, change important data. One example of data they proved they could change, they could log into medical databases and change blood types. Imagine a conflict where your medical treatment is actually killing people.
Mhm.
This got the attention of Department of Defense leadership and pushed them to find a solution, create a cyber command, the Joint Task Force for Computer Network Defense.
You know what's interesting, and I just fact checked this to confirm. So this is 1998 that Bob's talking about right now. And just real quick, it seems ludicrous to think that there wouldn't be some federal cyber command or cyber capability at the federal level in 2022, right? But in 1997, it didn't even exist. What I just fact checked is there was definitely um, a perfect storm or a conflagration of things going on. Loft Crack, the Loft Group out of Boston, led by Mudge famously and several others, they testified famously in front of Congress as their hacker selves in 1998 also. So there was a lot going on at the federal level, from a legislative position and a military position around cyber insecurity, frankly.
Yeah, so I was there for that too. And just prior to that, my business associate, Matt DeVoe, had graduated from a college in Vermont, written a thesis on the importance of using hackers to support the national security community. That thesis came to the attention of people like Richard Clark, who was in the White House, and helped motivate him to reach out to people like Loft. And so I think that was a very important formative stage for getting the national security community to wake up to the importance of reaching out to the security community.
Yeah, can you repeat that author for the thesis out of Vermont?
Yes, that's my business associate today. He's the CEO of OODA, Matt DeVoe.
Matt DeVoe. I'd love to look at that because it almost sounds like a bit of, a bit of cybersecurity industry history, as well as potentially a seminal paper for, launching 1,000 ships, if you will.
Yeah, it really is. And let me tell you another he wrote right around then. And this is how I met him, by the way. There was a contest that was run at the National Defense University on information warfare. It was called the Sun Tzu Information Warfare Contest. Matt wrote a paper with some co-authors in 1995 that won that contest. Now, get this title. It was titled, "In the Age of Digital Terrorism, Can You Trust Your Toaster?"
Oh boy. And this is
How
way before
prescient.
IoT. Yeah, this is way before.
Way before IoT. And
so is that kind of Matt's style? I mean, is he kind of a visionary, like big picture, futuristic thinking kind of guy?
He is, and you ought to get a load of what he's writing about today and talking about today. It's really fascinating. I think we should get into that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so Solar Sunrise happens. It's kids and, someone from Israel, which, by the way, Israel is fantastic at cybersecurity, if you didn't already know that. Small country, big capability. They stand up the cyber command. So what's it look like day one? You go in there with a lunchbox and just say, show me to the mainframe, or what are we doing?
It was kind of funny because no one really wanted to house us, but these 4 stars are saying you've got to house them. We were stood up in the DISA headquarters. We were in a bunch of old trailers in the parking lot. My first desk was a door over some other boxes to hold the door up. It was a perfectly fine desk, but it's kind of ratty. They did build us a place in the DISA headquarters to move into. We had a skiff and comms. DISA became a host. They couldn't, at first to stand us up, we were a direct report to the Secretary of Defense, which is not how the American military works. Really,
Mhm.
everybody knew we're supposed to eventually be underneath a combatant commander. A lot of fights and battles over who would take us, with the Air Force wanting to take control, the combatant command saying, no, you can't. Finally, Space Command was really clamoring to get control of us. They were given control. We report directly to Space Command.
Wait a minute.
Later,
In 1998?
yeah,
1999?
1998, there was a Space Command, Colorado Springs. Now, eventually, they, in another reorganization, merged into Stratcom, and Stratcom became our boss. Well, all of this was occurring while we were there trying to stand up defenses of the networks. So we had subordinate organizations in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. The certs in those organizations still worked for their services, but they operationally reported to us.
Okay.
The intelligence community by CONOP had agreed to support us. All I had to do was articulate needs to them, and they would support us. Great support from the intel community. But as soon as that stood up, there were some key issues that people had been tracking that needed to be handed to us. And one of those was Moonlight Maze.
Okay.
So,
Moonlight Maze. It begins.
yeah.
Where'd the name come from? How do these names come up?
Well, in this case, it was law enforcement that named it.
Okay.
And prior to us standing up, this was, and still, it was law enforcement led investigation. The Air Force Office of Special Investigations were called in to investigate a series of anomalous events in Dayton, Ohio. And those anomalous events included a system administrator logging in when he wasn't logging in.
Mm-hmm.
And a contractor noticed that. Investigation started, and it soon expanded out to other services. FBI got involved because it was hitting multiple organizations, including commercial organizations. And I believe it was the FBI who named it Moonlight Maze.
Okay. All right. So it lands on your desk. Now, just so I understand, you're a team of one, but you have access to resources in different departments. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So it lands on your desk. Are you like, what do I do with this?
Well, I remember some of the people briefing us on Moonlight Maze were just really glad that, I'm glad you guys got it now. And meanwhile, we only had it for Department of Defense. The FBI was in charge of a law enforcement investigation. And they made it clear to me and others, you do not interfere with this investigation. And some of the things I started saying early on caused them to caution me that if you interfere with a law enforcement investigation, you could be in trouble, even arrested yourself. It's just because I'm saying things like, hey, this could be a nation state. We need to pursue this. Could be China, could be Russia. They did not like that. They wanted to proceed as if they're going to collect evidence and take it to court. Well, if it's a nation state, you're not going to take them to court. Not going to happen.
Yeah, no kidding. Get in line with like all of the North Koreans from Lazarus Group that have been indicted, and all of, like there's more. I think the DOJ has more indictments for people who are never going to be brought to justice than they do people brought to justice. But that's an editorial. All right, so now you're butting heads.
What I did when briefed on all this stuff, I thought, it probably is it's something the intel community has to work. I consulted with some old mentors. It's always good to have mentors. One of the guys I asked was a guy named Rich Haver, who's been around in the intel community for a long time. He told me to go read some deeply classified material from a guy named Oleg Penkovsky, who was providing secrets from the Soviet Union. He was a GRU officer. He was providing these to the UK. Now, he had died in 1963. So this is 35 years before the event.
Yeah.
But there's stuff he provided way back then that my mentor thought would be relevant. And sure enough, I read this. By the way, there's unclassified stuff written about him too, called the Penkovsky Papers.
Okay.
If you read these Penkovsky Papers, it laid out exactly how the old Soviet Union would collect scientific and technical information for the GRU. If the GRU needed something, they would task groups like the Soviet Academy of Sciences to go attend conferences and collect information, for example. And he went on with extensive detail and described how they did this. Well, this matched up very well with what we were seeing in Moonlight Maze. We knew that whoever was stealing this information was targeting scientific and technical info. They were targeting computers that had stuff of use to military design, but also scientific things like a total atmospheric electron count was on one server that was attacked. There were a lot of other things that led us to believe that, okay, not only is it a nation state, it could be Russia. Once I started to form this thesis, we're able to then go out and task collectors. We tasked Humint to do things in Moscow. We tasked any SIGINT we could. We used imagery to look for places where there might be internet service providers in Russia. We tasked everything we could and started calling meetings together. I formed an assessment that said, I believe that this is Russia. It's the GRU using technical talent from the Russian Academy of Sciences, like the old Soviets did with the Soviet Academy of Sciences. Same building, different name now. Mm-hmm. And that became my operating thesis. The FBI, frankly, got mad about that. But this went all the way up to the senior levels of DOD. DOD and DOJ had meetings, including some in the Oval Office, where it was concluded that DOJ is still in charge of this investigation. But the Department of Defense has to take action as if this is a nation state that's attacking us. And it was the first advanced persistent threat. And so we did take action.
Yeah, so let me ask you about that, because like you're treading into like kind of uncharted waters at this point. Now, there was a playbook, if you will. There is a rules of engagement and how to operate traditional military warfare, but that's usually like you can look across the field and see your enemy, right? Or you can with aerial imagery see their supply lines and stuff. We're operating in a dynamic where geographical location and proximity are no longer relevant. How did that? I mean, did it take time for people to accept that and wrap their head around it, or was 1998 so far along that, like, you know, computers were commonplace and people were like, okay, this is natural?
It was really hard for people to wrap their head around it, and there was a history. This was not the first Russian activity in cyberspace. You might recall the story, the Cuckoo's Egg,
yes,
written about intrusions in 1986, right? Which was a couple of kids trying to sell stuff to the KGB, but that is widely regarded as the first KGB wading into cyberspace for espionage.
Yeah, it's called Cuckoo's Egg, and it's by Cliff Stoll, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm actually going to bring it up on chat so people can see the book. I've read it. It is a fascinating book, and his writing style is very, very enjoyable.
You know, I really think it's one of those great books that's like should be in the canon of our knowledge, because he's doing things that today are the first, you know, it's like the first intrusion detection system, and the first monitoring of networks, you know, the way he set up printers to alert whenever this intruder came online.
Yeah.
So
and you could see it right here. The book here, Cuckoo's Egg by Cliff Stoll. Little bit very similar to your situation, Bob, but a little different. This was at UCal Berkeley. And you know, this was in the 70s, right? Late 70s, I think, 78.
86 is what
86. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, this is another good one. There's a question in chat. She didn't preface it with a Q, but it's so good that I definitely want to bring it up. Longtime Simply Cyber community member and wonderful person, Jess Bishop, wants to know if you have documented Moonlight Maze in your experience and in book form.
I have not personally. I've written a little bit about it, just short pieces, but Fred Kaplan has a couple chapters on this in one of his books, The Dark Territory. And I think he does a very good job of describing the early days of cyber conflict, and has a pretty good section on Moonlight Maze.
Wow. Okay. So, and just as a quick aside, I know some people just got in the door here. We're talking with Bob Gourley about his work as basically in the Department of Navy, but he was in a special task force, the original Cyber Command, working on the original APT. And also, I just want to point out, Bob, a lot of times guests come on and they share like, a couple resources. I have like 6 different assets that I have to go look, all these different papers, all these different books, the Penkovsky papers, like you're just dropping knowledge like it's going out of style, man. I love it. Thank you.
Oh, thanks
Thank
for
you.
saying that. But I want to mention a couple other things like Penkovsky papers. Read that. Cuckoo's egg. Read that. But I bet everybody has heard of the Battle of Midway in World War II. A couple great movies out on that. Fantastic books if you're into history. That also played into this. One of my mentors at the time was a retired Navy 2-star intelligence officer who had been in the Battle of Midway as an ensign, Admiral Max Showers. And as a mentor to me, I met with him right before taking over this job at the J2 here. And he recounted for me the way we won the Battle of Midway was through not just intelligence, but getting proactive in our intelligence, of baiting the adversary to do something. And once they did that, we would know what they were up to. So getting proactive by feeding them something and then watching their reaction.
Yeah,
And
I mean, that was the approach that they used at Midway, correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, and I'm happy to go into a discussion on it, was effectively almost like threat hunting cryptanalysis, right? Like they thought they had broken some of the codes, so they started doing certain military positions in order to see if Japan would communicate a certain way, and if they did, they would confirm.
Right. And as I recall, it was Japan was using a symbol even after you broke their code. It was like AQ. Where is that? It could be the Aleutians or it could be Midway. So they had folks on Midway pass a message that says our water desalinization plant is down. And then you see this turned around in Japanese communications, and we're able to break more of their code and say, yes, they're headed for Midway.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. I love it. So getting back to Moonlight Maze, so you have now basically, gone down the rabbit hole. You have high confidence that it's GRU working out of the Soviet Sciences, refactored Soviet Sciences Academy. What happens at that point? I mean, do you hand it over? Like the FBI cannot investigate it because they don't do they do domestic only. So
well, actually, at the time they were doing a little bit of global stuff, and we got really lucky. The FBI had just done a big favor to the then president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin. There was a website in the U.S. that was saying some bad stuff about his daughter, and they wanted that taken down. Now, all sorts of freedom of speech kind of issues, but FBI found a way to do it and did this big favor to Yeltsin. So it was time for them to ask a favor of him. And they said, hey, and by the way, before doing this, they asked the Department of Defense and other agencies if it was okay to do this. Everybody objected and said, no, don't do this. But the Department of Justice went into the White House and got the White House permission to do this. So I wanted to say, not everybody agreed this was the right approach, but the FBI thought, look, there's a violation of the law. We're all law-abiding nations that want to work together as one. So we just did this favor for Boris Yeltsin. Let's get Russian law enforcement to do us a favor. And they asked if we could go over there and investigate a computer crime. So they pulled together a task force led by FBI, but it included an Office of Special Investigations and a Navy NCIS rep, and went to Moscow. We went to the ISP where we thought some of these attacks were coming from. We knew dates and times when they came from there, searched the records, and sure enough, we found attacks coming from that ISP that relate to the Russian Academy of Sciences. A quick thinking OSI investigator remembered another date that they hadn't even brought in case they're being manipulated, said, let me check on this date and time. Found it. Yeah, there's an attack right there. So they're getting success. They were there on a 4-day trip. Let me tell you what happened. After that meeting, all cooperation stopped. The Russian MVD, internal police colonel who was cooperating, disappeared, never to be seen again.
Oh my God. Okay.
So
that's one way to solve the problem. Holy crap.
The investigation team for the rest of that 4-day trip were given nice tours of the city and shown, pretty places from history and culture and museums and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
what was happening there? Russia, like other big bureaucracies, like a lot of our bureaucracies, don't talk to everybody. The GRU had not told the MVD, don't help these guys. The MVD didn't tell the GRU that the Americans are coming with a law enforcement investigation. So it all found out too late.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so are the attacks still actively going on at this time? Is it like an active campaign, or had it gone dormant and you were just kind of doing a post-mortem or a
It was
retrospective for?
extremely active. But as this was going on, since we knew now it's a espionage campaign by a sophisticated adversary, we have to take action. So we took a lot of action. We increased our defenses across DoD, pushed them out of the places we could, issued orders for how to patch and improve defenses, and really made a huge difference briefly. Um, as you know, cyber conflict is never over.
Mm-hmm.
It's the infinite game. In this particular battle, I say we won. We proved that intelligence and being proactive and forcing the adversary to do certain things revealed themselves, revealed their tactics. We were able to stop those tactics. The bad news is it's never over. Just like other conflict, it's infinite. They came back lower and slower. And the Chinese came back too. The Chinese started attacking after that.
Yeah, and again, I'm not sure if you're allowed to disclose, this or not, but did you guys engage with NSA at any point? I know you had like access to different departments, but they have the tip of the spear as far as cyber capabilities go. So, did you consult with them?
Yeah, absolutely. They were critical to our success. I called meetings with the entire intelligence community, and they sent reps from across their organization. At the time, there were two major sides to NSA. There was offense and defense, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And they would send reps from both to participate in our meetings and help us figure out what was going on. And these kind of meetings, by the way, were open free-for-alls with a lot of different ideas on who this could be. And we didn't always agree, including NSA, who would bring a lot of information. And I can't say that this is the assessment of everyone, but they contributed a lot and were very helpful.
Very, very interesting. So there you go, everybody. That's Moonlight Maze, the original APT. And like Bob said, you kind of stub them out, push them out the door, but they go and check the door handle on all the other doors.
Can I mention one other thing that I think is relevant to SOCs today?
You can mention as much as you want, Bob. Get all over it. You can take the stage. I'll leave.
I see a lot of security operations centers today. I work with a lot of security professionals. I know a lot of CISOs. I have friends in the community. And the really good ones, they're proactive. Probably everybody in your community. The reason they're here is they're already being proactive.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the secret to success with Moonlight Maze that is most relevant. We were proactive. And I think all the people, by definition, who are in your community are proactive people who want to dig a little deeper. And I think that that's the kind of thing we want in security professionals in our community.
I would agree 100%. When I'm hiring, I put a lot, spoiler alert, by the way, if you ever interview with me, I put a lot of emphasis in to proactivity, initiative, self-service. You know what I mean? Because I can't show you everything. I need to be able to give you like a direction and have you, come back to me when you run into an obstacle, not walk down the path with you. I could do it a couple times, but for the most part, I'm hiring so I can focus on other things, right? And that proactivity, 100% super valuable. So kind of like staying within Moonlight Maze, because like people are just salivating. I am an avatar of chat right now. I am salivating, just wanting to know every little morsel of detail of this. I'm curious, like, you talked about, not everybody had the same opinion and there was a lot of discussion going on. Like, how often did like politics or power struggles get in the way of progress or in the way of right things? And did it ever kind of, depreciate the mission?
Yeah, and it's funny because human beings are human beings, really, and that's another reason to look back at history, because the same kind of thing is going on today. I was just in a conference today and yesterday dealing with cybersecurity in space, and we're diving into things like the new Space Command and the relationship between that and DISA and NRO and other agencies. And I'm hearing echoes of the same kind of bureaucratic inefficiencies that we had during Moonlight Maze. So yes, not everybody agreed back then. Not everybody agrees today. There's something very human about that. But as a leader, I made the point to try to stay above the fray and just articulate things as, this is my assessment. And here's why I have my assessment. Here's what I know and what I don't know and what I think. And just speak clearly. Some people pushed back when I said, it's my assessment that Russia is behind Moonlight Maze. One, J3 from the Joint Staff told me, so you're saying Russia has conducted an act of war against the United States? You need to be very careful before you start saying that stuff. I said, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Russia is conducting espionage in our networks. You may decide it's an act of war or not, but historically, espionage has not been an act of war. And then I mentioned before the FBI pushing back, and they disagreed vehemently that I had an assessment that, I should not be allowed to have an assessment in their opinion. But the fact is, I am an intelligence officer. It's my job to have an assessment. So everything was not all in agreement. Others would say that, maybe it was Iran. Maybe it was some other, maybe it's a big criminal group. The evidence was overwhelming that it was Russia through the Russian Academy of Sciences. Another key point, this evidence is not just forensic evidence. If you were only looking at network forensic evidence, I think you could have said, hey, who knows? Could have been anyone. Even today, if there's an incident on your networks, forensics and network forensics is extremely important. That shouldn't be your only information to figure out who it is. You need all source information.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me okay. So as far as getting all this information goes, this group goes to Russia. You get, hard evidence to confirm your assumptions. And then you get basically lip service of like, here's the Kremlin, here's, this other landmark or whatever. You guys basically get kind of walked around, right? So when you fly back, I mean, is it at that point you just say, all right, like that's what the deal is, like the case is over? Like, I know you said you pushed them out and then they came back later, but like at that point, you guys, does the FBI just put the case away because they know that they're not going to pursue a arrest or anything, or how does it resolve?
Eventually, there was the wrap-up testimony to Congress, so there's public stuff out there. But eventually the investigation was wound down because, the adversary is not being seen anymore.
Interesting. So, all right. Well, you've obviously like right out the gate established value of the DoD setting up this cyber command, which I don't even know what they called it at that time, but it was the first cyber command, and you were the, the lieutenant or the intel officer over at the J2.
Yeah.
What, I guess, just out of curiosity, how did that, like, while you were still there, how did that cyber command continue to operate? Did it evolve quickly? Because, a lot of things when they first started out move quickly. Yeah.
We were my boss was a 2-star Air Force fighter pilot, great leader, who was responsible for standing up our organization. I was the J2. We had a J3 director of operations. We had a J5 director of plans, J1 director of admin, like a military joint task force. We ended up reporting to Space Command, a 4-star. So my 2-star boss worked for the 4-star general. Interesting dynamic there. Everybody on the Spacecom staff thought they were everybody's boss on our staff. So we just made it clear that no, I only have one boss. It's my 2-star.
Yeah.
Not you 400 guys. But the fact
is, bunch of chiefs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Except the intel guys are a little bit different. There was a great J2 at Space Command who was all about the mission and all about intelligence support to the mission. So he and I forged this wonderful relationship where he did everything possible to deliver intelligence support to our organization.
Mhm.
And his staff, many of them did not like the fact that I'm going directly to the intelligence agencies in DC. The J2 was fine with it, but his staff got very, very jealous and tried to get in the way of that. He gave me the top cover I needed to keep doing what was important for the mission. So a lot of lessons there. Great leader in the Spacecom J2. His deputy, an '06 Navy, Gail Harris. I'm still friends with her today.
Mhm.
Extremely supportive of the mission and what we do. So that's another thing. Back then, the team, a lot of military esprit. These are all still my friends today. I'm in touch with these guys
Yeah.
frequently. We've all gone different ways, but we stick together and talk about these days.
I love it. So, it kind of begs the question because we see a lot of movement around cyber commands, like basically over the last couple of years, like each agency has its own cyber capability, and then NSA was kind of the tip of the spear, like I said, and then CISA came out on the scene, and they're providing kind of like leadership, and DHS has its thing, and now there's Cyber Command. Cyber is labeled as the fifth battlefield now. In the military theater capacity. So there's a lot of I'm in charge of cyber here, but there's no. I want to know your thoughts around the splintering of all that, and philosophically, are you aligned to consolidating these things as kind of one super agency with liaisons into the other agencies, or do you like it the way it is? I'm curious your thoughts on the structure and where it could go.
Yeah, in some ways, I feel unqualified to really talk about that because I could easily get it wrong. So let me just give you these observations.
Okay. Okay.
Back when I
Spoken
started,
like a real intel person. Go ahead.
well, I want to give you some helpful info, but not say I'm definitely 100% confident. Like in the late '90s, early 2000s, there were computer emergency response teams. By the way, there was a time in our history when there was no such thing as a SOC. There was no such thing as a Security Operations Center. I remember when there was only one CISO. The first CISO in the world, Steve Katz, was in 1997, 1998. So in these days, people realized they needed computer emergency response teams. And all of a sudden, there's like 30 of them in the Department of Defense. And we go around and people did surveys, how many certs do we need? And everybody agreed we only need one or two, but I got to have mine.
Yeah.
And now it could be a similar thing with security overall. How much needs to be distributed and how much centralized? Another big issue is with Cyber Command, which good move, smart move.
Mm-hmm.
It's dual-hatted with NSA. Not a good move for a bunch of bad reasons. One is one guy with two jobs: collect intel and defend all of DoD from cyber. And they know he will not give up that job. Whoever's in that position, he or she will not give up the job on their own. That's just not the nature of a person that gets that kind of position.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very inefficient. The NSA is one of the crown jewels of America's intelligence capabilities. It needs to be well led, and it needs to have a dedicated leader. The Cyber Command is one of the most important combatant commands in the Department of Defense. It needs a good full-time leader and a good structure. And it's really time to separate those. Another thing to consider, Department of Homeland Security is really still a new department. It's formed after 9/11. 20 years is brand new in American history, really. They're doing great in cyber. The cyber policy coming out of DHS is good and smart and informed. The cyber actions out of CISA, I'm extremely proud of these people. They're great, strong supporters of theirs. So if 5 or 6 years ago you said who should lead security for the nation, I might say, well, maybe Cyber Command ought to do it for the nation. Now I'm saying, no, let's just keep beefing up CISA. Look at what they're doing. They're incredible. Do you agree?
You're not going to find a bigger champion of Jen Easterly than me. I think CISA is doing wonderful work, and I feel like they were cruising on the highway at like 65, so they were really moving and they were going in the right direction. And then Jen Easterly got into the driver's seat and like flipped, like Fast and the Furious. Like she flipped a button, there was like a Nas button, and she's just like, and she's just taking it like so far. And one of the best things that CISA's done is, like, we've been talking about military capability in government and secret rooms and secret conversations and class material and all this other stuff. Under Jen's stewardship, CISA has really blossomed into embracing this public-private partnership. And we all share the same internet, right? Like private critical infrastructure resides in the private sector. It is not a public sector service. Public sector has concerns and interests, and there's town water and stuff like that. But energy plants, energy grids, those are for profit. Banks, economics, agriculture, those are all for profit private sector businesses. And in order to actually properly protect the country and its interests, you need to collaborate with them and get their input and provide value to them. Sorry, Bob, you've hit a nerve with me. Like, one of the biggest problems that we had for years, and Jen fixed it, was the government would be like, please submit all incidents that you suffer. Please tell us all the IOCs and TTPs and crap you see. Like, just let us ingest everything. And human nature is reciprocal. And if you're just giving someone something because you're a patriot, or you're doing your part, and there's no reciprocation, like, where is the motivation? Like, if it's the end of the day and you're like, ugh, like, I should do it, but I don't want to because I want to go home and this is bullcrap. There's no reason for me to do it anymore. I don't see the value in it. She turned it on its head, where now they're publishing known exploited vulnerabilities, so you can actually prioritize your vulnerabilities within your organization. There's ISACs up the wazoo all over the place, which is partly through CISA. And then, the shields up, very, very outward-facing presence, right? I'm a huge advocate of security awareness and needing to be in people's faces with consistency, because they need to be able to know, okay, this is someone's agenda. This is what they're doing for me. Every time I see them, it's consistent. So I want to see it. I want to hear it. And Jen has done that. So yeah. That is my opinion. I love what CISA's doing.
I value your opinion, and I think it's informed and it's right. Here's another point about Jen. Remember this movie Good Will Hunting with Matt Damon? He's a janitor, mathematician, and there's a problem on a blackboard that's impossible to solve. But nobody told him it's impossible, so he goes in and solves it. Well, let me tell you another impossible problem to solve is cybersecurity for public education across the country, kindergarten through 12th grade. Yeah. It's been so impossible to solve. No one in government has dared even try, except Jen. And she's making progress. We see that today. And I feel like that's the soft underbelly of our nation. It needs to be improved. And nobody has done anything about it until recently. And I'm so proud of CISA for tackling these hard problems that no one else has been looking at.
Yeah, for years we've been treating the symptoms, not the problem, right? And you can stop the bleeding right here at the tactical level, at the transactional level. Hey, you're a network engineer, 25 years old. Here, let me skill you up really quick on cybersecurity. Now you can help protect whatever. But it's a point in time. It's not a solution. It just kicks the can down the road. I'm 100% with you. Actually, I just saw last week or this week, recently, a company released a K through 12 program that is free. It's a freemium model. So, right, there's like, you can pay a monthly fee and get an upgraded thing, but it's K through 12, or it's really K through like 5th grade. It's young kids, but it looks like Village Crossing, or one of these games that it's like the small body, big head, little characters, and they live in this like little ecosystem kind of thing, and it looks very bubblegummy and cute and pastel colors, but it's underbelly, it's everything underneath it that is engaging is cybersecurity related. So like you solve little puzzles, but the puzzles are like making like not a crappy password, or understanding what, like, not how multi-factor attacks work, but understanding that, like, oh, like you dropped your breadcrumbs, and now someone can figure out like what kind of cake you made or something like that. And if you had, like bought a second factor, like a dustpan brush that behind you can clean up that mess and they can't get it. So, stuff like that. It's relatable to children. So you're kind of like secretly educating them. on best practices and getting their mind right on it. And I think that really is important. Jen is attacking this, and I love it. But one of the other problems that I would argue is that, first of all, Bob, pull me back. Animal Crossing, thank you, Bob. Pull me back from the ledge if I go too far. But there's another systemic issue, is that the American education system is kind of broken, and teachers in K through 12 aren't financially compensated appropriately, so therefore they're not really motivated. You don't have that specialized skill set of cybersecurity practitioners who are going to go in. Like, hell, it's hard to get them to go into academia because of the compensation packages versus private sector, right? So you have this like void in talent on already coupled on the void of curriculum, for these individuals. So I think video games are going to be the right way to go. This one particular one I'm mentioning is a step in the right direction, but I think the only way to do it is video games, simply because a video game can be controlled by the individual end user without needing a lot of curriculum direction, right? You don't have to educate. You don't have to be a cybersecurity teacher in order to have a kid play a video game and learn some best practices and skill. You just kind of monitor them. So anyways, these are my thoughts on that. I'll turn it back to you, Bob.
Cool. No, these are all good points, and I think very important.
Yeah, I do. This is me, Bob. And I saw people in chat dropping spicy things. Certain things I'm super passionate about cybersecurity, and there's certain things that I just really have opinions on, very strong, and I get really excited about it, Bob. So that's that. Let me throw it to a couple questions here in chat that I saw. Well, this is a bit older one when we were talking about Moonlight Maze, but Adam wanted to know about the first honeypot. Did you guys do any kind of active defense back then? Either with Moonlight Maze or... Yeah, go ahead.
We did honeypots. It was part of our campaign to figure out who this was. So we set up honeypots to try to track these guys. And the way we got proactive, I mentioned the Battle of the Midway. That was being proactive. We found some proactive things to do, essentially putting bugs in beacons and setting up something that would be juicy for the Moonlight Maze attacker to get, and then using that as clues to figure out who it was.
That's awesome. So legit honey tokens back in the day. So even in the 90s, that technique was, well versed and well in there. Slightly unrelated, but Ben noticed your lock collection in the back. You pick locks, Bob? Is that in your?
I do. I play around with it, but look, he says, "Are you the lock picking lawyer?" That's very flattering to me. How very kind of him to say that.
Yeah.
But no, I'm in the lock picking lawyers fan club. But no,
yeah, he's very good.
Lock picking lawyer.
Yeah, I also see in your background you've got a looks like an Air Force pilot survival knife kit there.
That was, during the pandemic, I found in one of my storage boxes my old survival knife, and it was the kind issued to the Air Force. And me, I was in the Navy, and it's really one of the worst survival knives ever made in human history. It's done by the lowest bidder, and it dulls so quickly. They had to give you a little sharpening stone with it so you could sharpen it every time you cut a coconut open. But that's the original.
That's interesting. The reason I recognize it is because I have the same one as a gift from a good friend of mine who's a B-2 bomber weapons nav. And I thought that the stone was so if you fell behind enemy lines, you could keep it sharp and live for a long time. I didn't realize, I don't have any perspective on knives, so apparently I didn't realize it sucked. Thanks for breaking that to me, Bob.
Yeah. Hey, in recent gear, this is, you never know when you might need this. You might get locked out of your office on the way to work, or you leave your fob at home and you might need this.
Is that a credit card sleeve?
No, it's not a credit card. It's the size of a credit card, but it's got all your basic tools. And
yeah, but you can slide it into your wallet, yeah?
Or a little bit bigger case if you...
Oh. Yeah, you don't dabble, Bob. You've got multiple options in your lock-picking arsenal back there. I love it. I do love it. So let's change topics a little bit. This is one that's near and dear to my heart and aligned to what you were doing. So I have been huge. Like, I believed in my heart of hearts, and it's probably because I love cybersecurity so much, that the next military conflict, like global military conflict, would be a cyber war. We've heard the term, cyber Pearl Harbor is going to be the next major event. Someone's going to strike hard, WannaCry style, and just blow everything up, proverbially blow everything up. And then we see what happened in Ukraine with Russia. Russia attacked Ukraine. It is the global conflict. Russia came hot and heavy out the gate with cyber weapons, knocking over websites. The internet went down, and then quickly after March, April starts up. You have some of the IT army on the Ukraine side, kind of this call to arms. Anyone want to help us defend, attack? But that isn't really a military capability. It's essentially like a volunteer workforce. What are your thoughts on cybersecurity as a military capability, and how it would be, or your thoughts on how it's being implemented in the current conflict?
Well, I've come to believe that there will never be a cyber war. And what I mean is never a cyber only war. It's going to be kinetic plus cyber. And cyber is so incredibly important to war. But the war in Ukraine, as you see, and as you just mentioned, is both. It is, if you want to take and hold territory, you need to send people. If you send people, they need to be armed. And if you want to push people out of your territory when they're invading, you got to do that with weapons. It's the only way to get them to surrender or give up or die in place. So cyber helps. Cyber can make your folks more efficient, but cyber does not replace pushing out the adversaries with force. And when it comes to capabilities to attack another nation like Russia before the war, they were definitely trying to conduct espionage. They were definitely intruding on networks, and they were definitely attacking things. But the defenders get a say in that too. And the Ukrainian defenders have been preparing since 2014, improving their defenses. I give them a lot of credit. Also, all good nations are starting to cooperate and collaborate together. It started with Five Eyes, and then it became NATO, then all of the EU. And the EU was helping Ukraine start to build their defenses. In this conflict, I know there were some European nations that had sent defenders to Ukraine, and the U.S. had advisors there too, helping with defense. Ukrainian defenders should get all the credit, 100% of the credit, but it's a big team effort. So because of that team effort, it was harder for Russia to really use cyber to cause any true impact. They did have a successful damaging attack against some European ground stations for satellites, the Viasat attacks. But that was remediated fairly quickly, and it had no real impact on the war.
Yeah, I mean, it is surprising. I mean, you do bring up a very inarguable point that if you're going to I guess it's a difference is, what is the objective? Is the objective just to cripple, or is the objective to take the territory? And as you put, if it's to take the territory, you have to physically be present. You can't cyber weapon your way into owning land, basically. So that is a really valid point. I guess I just would expect, as Jess Bishop says in chat right here, or someone else maybe had mentioned it prior, that, knocking out the power so you can't, work at night, or you don't have access to digital communications. So your method of coordinating and logistical coordination, we need this many bullets, we need to move troops to this area, becomes depreciated, and you're operating in a much slower capacity as opposed to your adversaries who, say what you will. Dan Carlin, who's a podcaster who does hardcore history. I don't know if you've ever listened to hardcore history, Bob.
I have, yeah.
Yeah, Dan Carlin's excellent, but he always points out, and for those of you who don't know, Dan Carlin does hardcore history. It's a podcast on military history, mostly, almost exclusively. He always points out that the side with the technological advantage almost always wins. And that's why when gunpowder came on the scene, it just overwhelmed everyone. That's why when the H-bomb came on the scene, basically it ended World War II, or the atom bomb. So, with this technical advantage of cyber, I guess I would just think it would be more weaponized. Now, I would argue that we might begin to see it get turned on a little higher as we enter winter in Eastern Europe. Heat will become very important. Frozen pipes, so that could be an interesting thing. But
would you rather have a cyber weapon or a rifle that shoots more accurately 10 yards further than your previous rifle range? I'd go with the rifle that shoots 10 yards further more accurately at this stage of the conflict.
Yeah, definitely. When you have people like just from a human personal space self-defense, obviously cyber weapons are effective when proximity isn't a factor, right? We talked about this earlier. Geographical proximity, when that's not a variable, the cyber weapon's perfect. But obviously, if someone's coming at me with a bayonet, the last thing I'm going to do is like throw a malicious USB at them, right? That's just not going to slow them down.
Another thing I heard today, I mentioned I was at this space conference, and we're talking about cybersecurity of satellites and other space platforms. Had a great presentation from a leader at Space Command, and he made the point that in his mission space, if you do not have cybersecurity, all of your assets in space are just debris. It's worthless.
Wow.
So in that particular case, cyber is absolutely critical.
I agree. It's very, very relevant, but it's not the, I guess, like you said, having the rifle is more important. It's like super important, but it's almost like a required complementing piece or a required foundational piece, right? To the operation. It's very thought-provoking, Bob. This conversation's been fantastic. Let me throw one more question at you before we round it out, just to be respectful of everyone's time. Jess asks, do you feel global hacktivist participation on behalf of Ukraine helped with this, referring to the Ukrainian hashtag IT Army?
I think it helped. And let me tell you this, I have been in frequent contact with the Ukrainian Ministry of Digital Transformation since this latest phase of the war started in late February. And I've been doing what I can with a lot of other volunteers. I'm not the Hacker Army, but I'm a volunteer because I really want to pull for these guys. And the Ukrainian Ministry of Digital Transformation has been, first of all, before the war, they were critical in making Ukraine a digital society, helping citizens with digital applications and helping their startup world get started and accelerating. During the war, they've been helpful working with US IT companies, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. They've been great. And it's the Ministry of Digital Transformation there. I've been working with them. And Starlink, we helped the Ministry of Digital Transformation think through some of their issues with Starlink and optimize its use. And I'm still pulling for those guys. And I would say some of their counterparts in other agencies have been making use of this global hacker army and find it to be very efficient. Let me mention something else. I think it makes a point, since you asked this earlier question about cyber war. Another part of cyber war is having the connectivity to get your message across. And we've all seen Ukraine's leadership and workers have been very good at getting their message across. And their citizens have put these memes into our brains that we all know. Everybody knows the story about the old woman going up to the Russian soldier, wanting to give him sunflower seeds. Put these seeds in your pocket so when you die, there'll be some sunflower seeds growing. And there's the story of the ghost of Kyiv, who's shooting down all these planes. And the story of the brave Russian defenders of Snake Island replying to the Russian combatant, Russian warship, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
These kind of memes really help galvanize. Did I just get beeped? Really
no. I do the beep like just it's almost an inside joke.
That really helped galvanize support of citizens in all these open societies, which got us telling our governments, you have to support this war. And so is that a part of the cyber conflict? Maybe it is. It's the making sure that you can communicate your message effectively using technology to build support for your cause.
It's a fantastic point to end on, Bob, that cyber weapons, cyber warfare, it's not always a, you know, a digital missile, right? It's not always supposed to be a weapon in the sense of the traditional weapon of eliminating a target. It can be, whipping up a crowd and swaying public support, and that is part of the cool flexibility of cyber. Is that it can be morphed into different kind of actions on objective, right? It can have different ways that it manifests its impact, which makes it equally powerful and a modern weapon. So I love it. Jess Bishop wants to keep going for an hour. I appreciate it. So we are gonna wrap up here. We've been talking with Bob Gourley. Bob, I always give my guest an opportunity to final thoughts, share with chat. This has definitely been the fastest hour of Simply Cyber Live that I've ever experienced. And if chat wants it, if you are amenable to it, I would love to have you back on as a guest. We covered several things that we might talk about today, and we got to two of them. So there's a lot of meat on the bone that we can pick at if you're interested in it. So let me know, and but let me throw the big stage to you and let you get final thoughts. Sound good?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thanks, Bob.
I would like to tell you, we just had our OODA conference, OODA Con. A major theme that came out of that was the need for teams and trust. And it's tough building trust digitally like this, but it can be done. And I would like to connect with as many of you as possible via systems like LinkedIn or Twitter or YouTube. So find me and connect to me there. It takes a team to build strategic defenses, and it's good being able to network with like-minded people. And I think that is my main primary message, with the secondary message being, please keep in mind the lessons of Moonlight Maze. Number one lesson, you got to be proactive if you want to solve the big incidents. Jerry, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so true. And, I want to just bring it up here really quick so everyone can see it. This is the OODA Twitter account, right? Bob, this is how they would get you if they wanted to speak with you.
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay. And then also, guys, don't sleep on LinkedIn. So this is Bob's LinkedIn. He happens to be also restreaming live the talk right now. So, but
oh, cool! I didn't realize that.
Yep, yeah, you are paired with me, so I appreciate that. So connect with him here. The man has an amazing amount of knowledge and experience and lessons and stories and just value to the community. You've definitely brought an amazing amount of just insight and follow-up activities. You've given me like 5 or 6 assets I've jotted down. I'm going to Google them. I'm going to drop them in the show description after the fact. And then hopefully we'll see you again on another stream, Bob. Thank you so much, so much for your time and your experience and just sharing it with us.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks for this.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let me send Bob off to the green room while I spend just a minute sharing with you guys. I hope you guys loved, like when I say love, I mean loved that interview. That was so awesome. Like just the inner workings of how, the original APT, and it's not just all NSA, and the Navy was involved in the cyber commands. Wow, it was super cool. I learned a lot. I'm going to definitely check out a lot of these assets and papers that Bob mentioned. Also, I'd love to meet Matt DeVoe. That guy sounds like it'd be an amazing conversation to have with him. Chad, I want to thank all of you for being here today. You guys are always A+ audience members, and I genuinely appreciate it. Great questions. Jess, love the questions. Kimberly, Adam, you guys know who you are. Just thank you so much. I want to remind everybody, if you're new here, many of you are Simply Cyber regular community members, but every single weekday morning, I do a live cyber threat briefing with a couple hundred individuals, practitioners, and people looking to break in the industry. And tomorrow is going to be no different. So if you want to get in on this, it's the fastest 45 minutes of your morning. Bring a cup of coffee. 8 a.m., go to simplycyber.io/streams. You can see the URL at the top of the stage right now. Go there and you'll see exactly where the upcoming stream is tomorrow. That's going to do it for this episode of Simply Cyber Live, guys. Thanks so much. I hope you got value. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Cheers, everybody.